we're going to give away the Merciless Rage upgraded deck to one of our lucky listeners, which will include the Precon and the 15 upgraded cards with sleeves and a deck box to go along with it. All you need to do to enter is be a subscriber of our YouTube channel and then comment and like this video. We will tweet out the winner on November 1st and also announce it on our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and keep an eye out for other ways to earn entries over the course of the month. Hey guys, welcome to BudgetEDH. I'm your host Mike, and on this week's episode, we bring you a $100 budget upgrades video for the Merciless Rage Rakdos Commander 2019 pre-constructed deck. What we're going to do is we're going to take the pre-constructed deck at its MSRP of $40. We're going to take out 15 cards that we feel don't synergize well with the deck, and then we're going to add in 15 new cards with a budget of $60, making our grand total for this deck under $100 on TCG Player. The Commander 19 pre-constructed decks include a wealth of new cards and reprints in them that make them great for both new players and enfranchised players. Inside the deck there is 6 ramp cards, which is a little light. We'd like to be around 10. There's only 7 card draw spells, which while it does seem light, Anje is a very powerful card draw commander, being able to loot away all your bad cards. There's only 2 board wipes in the deck, which is a little light. We'd probably want 1 or 2 more, but the deck does make up for it with its targeted removal spells, which includes 13 spells. And then there's 23 madness spells in the deck that can be used to take advantage of Anje's untapping ability. The MSRP of these decks is around $40, and you can still currently find this for around $40 on TCG Player. The 15 cards that we added to this deck cost around $48 on TCG Player, bringing this deck to a total of $88. If you use the link in the description down below, it will help us support our channel and help us create future content. Let's talk about the commanders that are included in the pre-constructed deck. Inside the commander products, there's 3 commanders that you could use as the commander of your deck, as they include all the colors required for the pre-constructed deck. And then typically they have 1 commander that doesn't include all of the colors, so you wouldn't be able to use them as your main commander for the deck. The first commander that we're going to talk about is the commander that comes on the packaging of the box, and it's Anje Falkenrath. It's 1 a black and a red for legendary creature vampire with haste. You can tap it and discard a card to draw a card. Whenever you discard a card, if it has madness, untap Anje Falkenrath. Anje has a powerful set of abilities on her card. She's a cheap commander at only 3 converted mana cost. She comes in and impacts the board right away because she has haste, and she has looting on her where she can smooth out your draws by discarding any unwanted cards you have in your hand. The next commander I want to talk about is Chainer Nightmare Adept. It's 2 a black and a red for a legendary creature human minion. It has discard a card. You may cast a creature card from your graveyard this turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if you didn't cast it from your hand, it gains haste until end of turn. Chainer's abilities set him up to be a classic reanimator style commander. Being able to discard cards that you don't need to be able to continuously reanimate creatures from your graveyard is an extremely powerful ability, and also being able to give those creatures haste whenever they enter the battlefield is also very powerful. And one thing to note here is that it doesn't say that you have to use that ability for the creature to gain haste. If you were to use something like a reanimate to bring something out of your graveyard to the battlefield, Chainer would still give that creature haste as well. The next commander I want to talk about is Grevin Predator Captain. It's 3 a black and a red for a legendary creature with menace. Grevin Predator Captain gets +X+0, where X is the amount of life you've lost this turn. Whenever Grevin attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, you draw cards equal to that creature's power and you lose life equal to that creature's power. Grevin is a really great Voltron style commander and has some pretty unique abilities attached to it. Being able to sacrifice creatures to draw cards and lose life, also pumping your Grevin up to get in for a lot of damage, is a very powerful ability. And Grevin also has menace, which makes him tough to block. Your opponents will have to put 2 creatures in front of him, and it does make him a really great Voltron commander. And then the last creature that we want to talk about can't be your commander in the pre-constructed deck is Crick, Son of Yawgmoth. It's 4 and then 3 Phyrexian black mana for a legendary creature. It has lifelink. For each black in a cost, you may pay 2 life rather than pay that mana. Whenever you cast a black spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Crick, Son of Yawgmoth. Now we know in Commander, being able to cheat on mana costs is one of the most powerful things that you can do in the game. Now obviously we can't use him in this pre-constructed deck. Crick would be best built in either a reanimator type shell or in a storm build where you're trying to dump out your hand very quickly and play a ton of spells and then winning with something like Aetherflux Reservoir or with Tendrils of Agony. Based on all the commanders included in this deck and the deck breakdown, we're going to use Anje as our main commander for this deck simply because there are a lot of madness cards which Anje has a lot of synergy with, and she does also have some reanimator synergies with her as well, which we will build on with our 15 cards that we add. Let's talk about the 15 cards that we're going to add to this deck. So the first card that we're going to add to this deck is a madness card, and it's Voldaren Pariah. It's 3 black for creature vampire horror. It has flying, and you can sacrifice 3 other creatures to transform Voldaren Pariah. It has madness, black. And Voldaren Pariah transforms into Abolisher of the Bloodlines. It's a flying creature that when it transforms, target opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. We want a few more madness cards in the deck to help get to our main combo, which we'll go over in just a few moments. And Voldaren Pariah is one of the better madness cards that you can put into this deck. The next card that we're going to talk about is Vilis, Broker of Blood. It's 5 black for a legendary creature demon with flying. You can pay a black and pay 2 life. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Whenever you lose life, draw that many cards. Vilis is a powerful draw engine that also gives you a way to lose life on the card by giving creatures -1/-1. So every time you activate Vilis's ability, you're going to draw 2 cards, lose 2 life for 1 black mana, which is extremely powerful and is a really great rate for drawing cards. We do have a lot of ways of reanimating this creature from our graveyard to the battlefield with some of the other cards that we include in this deck that makes it to where you can get this creature out fairly early. The next card that we're adding is Psychosis Crawler. It's 5 colorless mana for an artifact creature horror. Psychosis Crawler's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your hand. And whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. With Anje, we're going to be discarding and drawing a ton of cards over the course of the game. This is a potential win con in the deck. You can set up for some pretty crazy turns with Anje where you're discarding and drawing and untapping your Anje, and you may draw a lot of cards in one turn where your Psychosis Crawler is chipping away at your opponent's life total. Next up, we have Archfiend of Ifnir. It's 3 black for a creature demon with flying. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control. It also has cycling too. Archfiend of Ifnir is perfect for this deck as we will be discarding a ton of cards. It's going to shrink all of your opponent's creatures. And one thing to note is that it is a -1/-1 counter and it doesn't go away at the end of turn, making this a very powerful card. Next up, we have Mausoleum Secrets. It's 1 and a black for an instant. It has Undergrowth. Search your library for a black card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. In this deck, this card operates similar to a Demonic Tutor because we're going to have so many cards in our graveyard because Anje is going to keep churning through our deck and getting rid of creatures that we don't need or cards that we don't need. We're going to be able to search our deck for most cards with this card in our deck. Next up, we have Entomb. It's 1 black mana for an instant. Search your library for a card, put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. Entomb is a great way to get a powerful creature or card from our deck to put directly into our graveyard. We do have several ways of reanimating creatures in this deck, which I'll go over in just a moment. And there's several creatures that we'll want in our graveyard to be able to reanimate, including Vilis and Psychosis Crawler, plus 1 extra that I'll go over here in just a moment. So next up, we have our reanimate spells in the deck. The first being Reanimate. It's 1 black mana for a sorcery. Put target creature card from your graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You lose life equal to its converted mana cost. One thing to note with all these reanimate spells and enchantments is that it doesn't say that it has to be from your graveyard. So if your opponent has a powerful creature in their graveyard that you want to reanimate and put on your side of the board, you could use those spells to reanimate from your opponent's graveyard too. Then we have 3 enchantments that can enchant a creature card in a graveyard and return them to the battlefield under your control. The first being Animate Dead. It's 1 and a black for an enchantment. Animate Dead is going to return a creature card in a graveyard to the battlefield under your control. and then the animate dead is going to be attached to it. And then whenever animate dead leaves the battlefield, that creature's controller sacrifices it. And then it also says enchanted creature gets -1/-0, which we really don't care about. Similar to animate dead is Dance of the Dead. It basically does the same thing, except enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. And you can pay 1 and a black to untap that creature during your upkeep. And then the last card that reanimates cards from our graveyard is Necromancy. It's similar to both of the previous cards, except the main difference is that you can play Necromancy at instant speed. If you do, you bury the creature at the end of turn. Necromancy gives you a really great way to respond to control players. When they go to tap out, you can play your Necromancy and pull a creature out of a graveyard, since you know it's generally going to be fairly safe. You can also respond to an opponent winning the game by trying to go for a combo yourself by using Necromancy as an instant. That's another great way to use the card. Our main win con in the deck involves those 3 enchantment reanimate spells and World Gorger Dragon. World Gorger Dragon is 3 red for a creature with flying and trample. When it enters the battlefield, exile all other permanents you control. When it leaves the battlefield, return the exile cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. Now the way this works is that if you have World Gorger Dragon in your graveyard by using Anje's discard ability to loot World Gorger Dragon away, you can use one of those 3 enchantment reanimate spells to bring World Gorger Dragon back onto the battlefield. Those enchantments are going to enchant World Gorger Dragon. And what's going to happen is when it enters the battlefield, it's going to exile all permanents that you control, including those enchantments. When that happens, it's going to make you sacrifice or bury the World Gorger Dragon, returning it back to your graveyard. When World Gorger Dragon leaves the battlefield, it's going to return the exiled cards to the battlefield under their control, so that enchantment will come back, and then you'll be able to reanimate World Gorger Dragon again. This is going to create an infinite loop where your World Gorger Dragon's going to come back and forth from their graveyard and exile all other permanents that you control in the process. What you can do while that's happening is float mana and generate infinite mana that way. One thing to note here is that you do need another creature in the graveyard to be able to animate dead onto whenever you generate your infinite mana, because you're not going to be able to break the loop unless you have another creature in your graveyard for your animate dead or your other spells to target. Now there's 2 ways that we can win the game with World Gorger Dragon and infinite mana. The first being Sun-Scorched Desert. It's a land that when it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target player. You can also tap it for a colorless mana too. As you're exiling all the permanents on your battlefield, if you have Sun-Scorched Desert on the battlefield, you'll continue to blink that card and deal 1 damage to a player every single time. Since it's an infinite loop, you will kill all of your opponents with Sun-Scorched Desert. The next way to do it is with Cut to Ribbons. So Cut to Ribbons is a split card, and Cut is 1 and a red for a sorcery, and it deals 4 damage to target creature. The side that we really care about is the Ribbon side, and it's an Aftermath card. You can cast this spell only from your graveyard, then exile it. So once you have instant mana, you can pay black X, and then each opponent loses X life. So you'll win the game with Cut to Ribbons. Let's briefly go over the 15 cards that we took out of this deck to make room for our upgraded cards. First up, we have Hate Mirage. It's 3 and a red for a sorcery. Choose up to 2 target creatures you don't control. For each of those creatures, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Those tokens gain haste. Exile them at the beginning of the next end step. We're taking Hate Mirage out of the deck because it really doesn't fit with the strategy that we're trying to go with this deck. Then we have Hedonist Trove. It's 5 black for an enchantment. When Hedonist Trove enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target opponent's graveyard. You may play land cards exile with Hedonist Trove. You may cast non-land cards exile with Hedonist Trove, and you can't cast more than 1 spell this way each turn. This is a really cool card, and if you're playing the deck more casual, this is a really fun card to include in the deck. It is pretty expensive at 7 mana. We're trying to go with a more focused build where we're trying to win through a combo, so this card really doesn't fit. Next up, we have Bloodthirsty Blade. It's 2 colorless for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and is goaded. You can pay 1 to attach Bloodthirsty Blade to target creature an opponent controls. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. This card is better suited in a deck that is more of a pillar fort type strategy, or in a deck like Thantis the Warweaver or Merciless, where you want your opponents attacking each other. We don't really care about any of this stuff in this deck. The next card we're going to get rid of is Key to the City. It's 2 colorless for an artifact. You can tap it to discard a card. Up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn. And whenever Key to the City becomes untapped, you may pay 2 colorless. If you do, draw a card. This is another way to be able to cast Madness cards, and it's a very slow way to do that. Having to pay 2 colorless mana whenever it's untapped to draw a card and holding up that mana every turn is pretty expensive. We don't really want to cast our Madness creatures anyway. They're not very efficient, and you're not going to get a lot of power out of the Madness cards except for maybe a couple of them. We really just want to focus on our combo. Next up, we're going to take out Scare Tiller. It's 4 colorless for an artifact creature Scarecrow. Whenever it becomes tapped, choose one. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Scare Tiller is a great card for a Lands Matter deck, but since we're not playing that, it really doesn't have a home here. Next up, we have Mire in Misery. It's 1 and a black for sorcery. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or enchantment. While I do like that Wizards is trying to give black ways to deal with enchantments, I don't feel like this is the right way to do it. We are giving our opponent the choice on sacrificing a creature or an enchantment, so unless they only have an enchantment, this is going to get their worst creature most of the time. Next up, we're going to take out Aeon Engine. It's 5 colorless for an artifact. Aeon Engine enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it and exile it to reverse the game's turn order. This is a card that could find play in a chaos type strategy, but since we're trying to remain more focused on the Madness theme and combo, we're just going to take this out of our deck. Next up, we're going to take out Armillary Sphere. It's 2 colorless for an artifact. You can pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. This is a really bad artifact. I don't recommend playing this card in any commander deck. There are so many better mana rocks that you could play at 2 mana, like Fel Warstone, any of the diamonds, any of those cards are going to be much better than Armillary Sphere. Especially since it doesn't give you any ramp, it just gives you the lands and puts them into your hand. Next up, we're going to take out Boneyard Parlay. It's 5 black for sorcery. Exile up to 5 target creature cards from graveyards. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put all cards from the pile of your choice onto the battlefield under your control and the rest into their owner's graveyards. This is a very situational card. While we will be filling our graveyard up with plenty of creatures, many of those creatures have minimal impact on the game because they are Madness creatures. So we're really hoping for our opponents to have some really juicy stuff in their graveyard, and we don't want to be in a spot where this card's a dead card in our hand. Then we're going to take out Wildfire Devils. 3 and a red for a creature. When it enters the battlefield and at the beginning of your upkeep, choose a player at random. That player exiles an instant or sorcery card from their graveyard. Copy that card. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. This card is too random to have any impact on the game. There's no way to control this card. You could just end up with a really bad spell every turn, and for 4 mana there's better cards that you could be playing in your deck. Then we have the Eldest Reborn. It's 4 and a black for a saga. On 1, each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. On 2, each opponent discards a card, and on 3, put target creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. This is a very slow card in our deck and doesn't really have a whole lot of impact on the game. Next up, we're going to take out Skyfire Phoenix. 2 red for creature Phoenix with flying and haste. When you cast your commander, return Skyfire Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. Again, this card doesn't have a huge impact on the game. A 3/3 flyer for 4 that you can return from your graveyard to the battlefield really doesn't do a whole lot in this deck. Then we're going to take out Soul of Innistrad. 4 black for a creature avatar with Death Touch. You can pay 3 black to return up to 3 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, and then you can pay 3 black and exile it from your graveyard, return up to 3 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. This is a very expensive card in the deck, and you don't really want to get the cards from your graveyard back to your hand. We want to be able to reanimate those cards, so this really has minimal effect in the deck. The next 2 cards that we're going to take out are land cards. Since this deck has 39 lands in it, it's easy to cut 1 to 3 basic lands from this deck and still have a really good mana base. The 2 cards that we're going to take out of this deck, the first one is a tapped land and it's Cinder Barrens, and you could replace this with any other tapped land in the deck. In these pre-constructed decks, they do give us a lot of tap lands in them because they're very inexpensive, and in my opinion, I would rather just have a basic mountain or swamp in the deck instead of having all these tap lands in there. And the next card I'm going to take out is the card I've taken out of every single one of these decks, and it's Temple of the False God, and it's for the same reason. It taps for 2 colorless, but you can only activate it if you control 5 or more lands. Sometimes this will be a really great card, and other times it's going to sit on the battlefield and not do anything because you're not going to have 5 lands on the battlefield, and that's not a risk that I'm willing to take. I'd rather just have any other basic land in this deck than this card. I want to take a moment to thank my patrons for their patronage. Your support really does mean a lot to me and helps keep this channel going. If you found this content helpful, consider subscribing to our channel. And check us out on patreon.com/budgetedh if you want to learn more about becoming a patron of our channel. Thank you for watching our video today. If you have any suggestions for any cards that we may have missed in this deck tech that are working out really great, let us know in the comments down below, and we'll see you guys for the next video.